Welcome to the Ignite Podcast, where we introduce thought leaders and subject matter experts that you'll want to consider for your next corporate event. Now, here's your host, Dennis Warden.
Well, I want to welcome you to the Ignite Podcast, and I am so pleased to have with me as our guest this time, Dr. Randy Ross. Randy, welcome to the Ignite Podcast.
Well, Dennis, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you.
We have been, business associates in far as working together as a speaker, but we've been friends for a long time. And so it is fun to connect this way and talk about what you do. And you'll see sitting behind me, that's my thinking chair. And when I was with Dr. John Maxwell as his director of marketing, John always talked about an office having a thinking chair. So when I built up my home office, I had to have a thinking chair in it. And the reason I bring that up is I've got your copy of your book, Remarkable here. And I remember when I got your copy of the book and I sat down in the thinking chair because I love the way the book was written. But the content of it was, it was something. It wasn't regurgitated leadership, culture development. It caused me to have to think. So I moved from my desk to my thinking chair so that we could really get into it. But you talk at the top of the book. It mentions, maximizing results through value creation. Let's talk a little bit about the book, why you wrote the book, and really what's this value creation all about.
Yeah, well, I love that. First of all, let me go back. I have a thinking chair too. You've been in my office. Yeah. And I also have a thinking chair. My wife just wishes I would sit in it more often. So I appreciate that. But thanks for the word about the book. Remarkable was a lot of fun because we wrote it as a leadership parable. We wanted to impart principles that would help people practically understand this whole concept of value creation. Because as you well know, that's a common catchphrase in the marketplace. And we want to create value, bring value, add value. But very few people actually know how to do that, because value creation is about bringing more to the table than you take away. Mm-hmm. And it means leaving a positive wake in people's lives. And oftentimes in business settings, you see this sort of a reciprocal expectation. I'll give you something if you give me something in return. And even if that's not spoken, it's sort of, expected. And that's not value creation at all. But we wrote the book Remarkable to give leaders ideas on how to create a more inspiring culture. But it's also for individuals who want to improve their relationships as well, Dennis. Mm-hmm. The word remarkable for me holds great significance. As you know, it's the name of our company. And it's also the name of the book. But the word remarkable in itself means that you do what you do. You deliver a service or a product in such a way that you exceed all expectations. You provide world-class experience, that you go above and beyond anything that anyone would expect, to such a degree that you make a positive impression on people that's so great that when they leave your presence, they have this irrepressible desire to talk about you. In other words, you've made such a positive wake in their world that they can't help but go out and tell other people. And when they're telling other people about how you've impacted their lives, when they're remarking about you, then you indeed are remarkable. And that's the kind of context of the entire book. It's how do we make such a positive wake in the world by finding big problems and then leveraging our strengths and our talents to solve those problems.
Yeah, one of the things that is unique about the book is it's in the story form. It allows the reader to really put him or herself in a place of really saying this is how I can apply it in my workplace, or how I can apply it in my business. But I'm thinking, like in the book, Good to Great, and you have some incredible videos that you've done where you've, interviewed people, or you've allowed us to have a peek into somebody's remarkable life. And so what does a remarkable company look like, or a remarkable person look like?
Yeah, well, we talk about remarkable within this context, that being a value creator there are three questions that you can ask yourself that will help you try to determine whether or not you're creating value for others. And the first question is, do you create more value than you take? It's a great question. And it really kind of shows whether or not you have a scarcity mentality or whether or not you have an abundance mentality. Because here's the idea. If I have a scarcity mentality, Dennis, then that means I'm going to rush to the table and position myself to get as much value for myself as I possibly can, because I have this mistaken belief that if I don't get to the table to get my share, it's going to be gone, and then I'm going to be left, in a deficit. But a value creation mindset is a mindset of abundance, which says this: no, 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 no. If we all combine our efforts and if we all bring more to the table than we take away, then at the end of the day, there will be a surplus left on the table that then can be shared by everyone who helped to create that value. So think about it this way. Think about it in terms of just relationally, with team members, for instance. Oftentimes in a leadership setting, I'll ask leaders, what do you expect from your people? Mm-hmm. And they're very, very quick to rattle off all the things that they expect from their people. And then I'll let that hang for a minute, and then I'll ask a follow-up question. Hey, that's great, and I understand that, but here's the second question. What do you want for your people? And a lot of times I get a blank stare because they've not given that as much thought. They know what they want from their people, but they don't know what they want for their people. In other words, what are they offering to them? And just take it in the context of marriage. If I expect more from my wife than I'm willing to give to her, I think about it in terms of an emotional bank account. If I make more withdrawals, if I make more demands, if I have more expectations that she provide things for me, then I'm focused on providing things for her, which is making deposits. If I make more withdrawals emotionally than I make deposits, it won't be long until our relationship will be bankrupt, right? On the other hand, if I make more deposits into her account than I make withdrawals, our relationship is going to be rich. So the question I challenge leaders, or anyone for that matter, to ask themselves at night when you lay your head on the pillow, ask yourself this question: did I bring more value to those in my world today than I expected from them? Did you bring more to the table than you took away? That's the first question. Second question is, did you leave a positive wake? And we all, in every encounter, either create a negative or a positive wake, because every relationship is emotionally framed. And oftentimes leaders don't slow down long enough to smell their own exhaust. And it's important to get, feedback from others to say, hey, how am I doing? Am I providing everything that you need to be successful? What can I do better? What more can I provide for you? That idea of, did you leave a positive wake in every encounter today? And the last question is, what problems did you solve? Because the best way to leave a positive wake and the fastest way to create value is to find the biggest problem you can and solve it. The bigger the problem you solve, the more value you create. The more value you create, the more invaluable you become. So it's just a simple framework, a simple context to ask yourself and measure yourself as to, are you making a remarkable mark in the world?
So I like the use of the word wake. Being, loving to be out, growing up in northern Minnesota, loving to be out on boats. Even cruise liners, but being out on a boat, you can look behind you and you can see the wake, right? And so especially when I would go fishing up in Lake of the Woods, northern Canada, I mean, massive lakes, nobody else, easy to get lost. So you would pick a point and you would head towards that point. And you look behind, and if the wake was going, straight behind you, you knew you were on course. But if it was zigzag, you knew that you were, you were bouncing basically from shore to shore. So I'm curious, you're unique in the fact that, I think you're unique in the fact that you're not only a gifted writer, but a gifted speaker. So, and we've been talking about the book Remarkable, but when you go in and you speak for a company, or you do some coaching on site for a company, whatever that might look like, how do you set for them a point. This is where we're going to head. This is how we're going to have a culture that is really a relationship culture. How do you set that course for them?
Yeah, great question. Well, I guess I like to describe myself, and I hope that in my speaking and my writing, that I provide very practical wisdom and needed hope to untangle some of life's toughest issues. And so, what I like to do is take complex problems that we all encounter in life, whether it's interpersonally or in team dynamics or in corporate culture, and try to synthesize those issues and make them as simple as possible. Because I believe this, that any fool can take something simple and make it complex, right?
Yeah,
Like Einstein said that. It takes a measure of
right.
genius to take complex ideas and boil them down to their essence and then be able to address them effectively. So I provide, I think, needed hope and the wisdom, practical principles and applications that anyone can take away and begin to apply to their life immediately to improve their relationships and to improve their leadership. So for me, Dennis, a win when I come away from a conference, if people come up, and they frequently do, and say, man, this was incredible. Thank you for the insights that you gave that will help me build a better team. But more importantly, I know I can take these principles home and I can apply them at home with my wife, with my
Mm.
kids, with my closest relationships. And so for me, if I can impart, transformational truths to people that will make their relationships better on every level, that's a huge win for me.
Hmm.
And so that's what I want to do when I enter into any setting, is to give practical guidelines that will make relationships better, because you and I both know that the health of your relationships determines the happiness of your life.
Hmm.
And you and I know that people and organizations thrive in relationally rich environments, but those are not as common as you might think. And that's really kind of why we wrote the next book, Relationomics, was to
Yeah, yeah,
help people understand those relational dynamics.
yeah. I was going to follow up with that, because you came out of Remarkable into Relationomics. And so tell me a little bit about, I mean, you're not just sitting around thinking well, maybe you are, because you're already working on your next
I'm
book.
working on another one right now.
But as you were thinking from Remarkable, Relationomics, what was the message that you wanted to get out there that wasn't included in Remarkable, but
Yeah.
just kind of on this, because you're taking your readers on a journey. So we've gone from Remarkable to Relationomics, and I don't know where you're going to take us in the next book, but let's talk about Relationomics and the why behind that, and then the value that's created for an organization. Again, as a speaker, trainer, coach, I'd love to hear from you about that.
Well, so Remarkable, as you mentioned, was a parable, and it was a fun book, and there's a lot of wisdom in there that you can unpack in the narrative. But when we finished the book, it was like we thought, okay, this is great, but how do we take that theory, a lot of those ideas, and while it was practical to a great degree, we wanted to then produce a how-to book. So now you understand value creation and you understand the principles of axiology and value creation. But now we wanted to say, okay, this is a very down and dirty, quick and simple. How do you build healthier relationships and build better teams? And so that's what Relationomics is all about: business powered by relationships. And the reason for that book is that as we looked across the landscape of the corporate environment, we just saw so many corporate entities that were toxic when it came to relationships. You would think that by the time we hit maturity, graduate from college, enter the workforce, that most of us would have mastered what most of us would consider to be simple principles of relational dynamics. But that's just not true, because
Mm-hmm.
common sense is not always common practice. As you know, there are just a lot of environments where they might be rife with conflict, unresolved conflict, or unhealthy competition, or people pretending and posturing, self-promoting, and all those things that go against the grain of authenticity and transparency. And the greatest organizations that we've worked with and that we've seen are organizations that are completely transparent. Um, Authenticity means that you're honest with yourself about yourself. Transparency means you're honest with other people about yourself. And there are a lot of corporate environments that are so politically um, involved that they're not transparent and humble. And so we wanted to give principles that team leaders could use to create more inspiring environments. And so that's what Relationomics is all about. We talk about creating open loops of feedback. We talk about engaging in the growth spiral. We talk about having raw, constructive, developmental conversations. We talk about the rules of engagement for working through conflict. There's just so much practical information in Relationomics that we wanted to put in the hands of leadership.
So within every company or organization, you have different levels of leadership, right? You have the corner office, the CEO, but you may have a branch manager, or you may have somebody that's a line manager, or somebody other leadership within that company. But we often heard, the buck stops here. So I mean, it has to be modeled at different levels within the company, and certainly with leadership, because they can be the lid, so to speak, on it. But so how do you transfer this across because you have an audience often made up of different levels of leadership within the company, and I may be the local manager, and I'm pointing to the boss from New York, and I'm saying, well, it's not me, it's him, it's her. How do we handle that in Relationomics?
Well, it's important for us to realize that leadership is at every level within the life of the organization. Mm-hmm. And you know that, and your listeners know that as well. It's not just top down, but it's bottom up as well. But it's also side to side. Some of the most influential people that I know within corporate organizations are the folks on the front line. They may not aspire to have authority over other people. They may be individual contributors. That's where they're happy. That's where they want to play. But some of those individuals can be some of the biggest influencers in terms of how they impact how other people feel and think and how they accomplish their work. They can be more inspirational than the C-suite in many situations. And so there is the law of the lid. You've got to start at the top, and it's got to trickle down. But if you're in an organization, you can have an impact right where you sit. You can be a huge influencer. You can be a huge leader, whether you have the title or not. And that's what Relationomics is really all about. It's about how do you interact in such a way that you actually become contagious and inspirational.
Love it. I had a good friend out of Southern California when I was in radio and managing a Los Angeles radio station, John Jolliffe. And John had a daily radio program, but his saying, and we had bumper stickers at that time and everything, was two simple words: own it. Yeah. And so really what you're saying is whatever level you're at, you need to own it. You need to own the relationships that you have an opportunity to have influence over.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
So we're talking about Remarkable. We're talking about Relationomics. We're talking about a book that's you're in process of writing now. But what are you reading? What does Randy feed himself on to grow as a leader and grow in relationships?
Well, right now I'm doing a lot of reading because I'm combing through 2 decades of research for this next book. So I'm reading a lot on the topic of hope. I'm reading a lot about Charles Snyder and his work at the University of Kansas. He constructed this whole concept of hope theory. And so Snyder is a big person. Shane Lopez is another one that I'm reading. But right now, Dennis, I'm trying to gather research from the last 2 decades and distill that down into a book that will, again, give practical wisdom in layman's language about this whole idea of hope. the title we've settled on is Hope Rises, Making Your Life, Love, and Leadership Soar. I think it's a message that's so appropriate for our time right now, that
Yeah.
people are reaching for hope, and hope sometimes is a little bit of a mushy concept. It's misunderstood. And so I want to try to bring some clarity and some understanding to what hope actually is and why it's so profoundly important, not only in life and in relationships, but also in leadership.
I love it. It's so fleeting. I have hope today and I lose hope tomorrow. Something
Well,
comes along.
what's interesting is that hope, from a case standpoint, is incredibly impactful, because the research shows that students who possess hope do much, much, much better in school. Uh, Businesses that have high hope employees are far more productive, by up to 14% more productive. So if you're looking for a jump in your performance, more so than anything else, hope predicts that. But hope is also a predictor of happiness and well-being. It's a predictor of healthy relationships. And so we're trying to tie all that together and help people understand what hope actually is. And it's possible to be in a hopeless situation and still be filled with hope. And that's an interesting dichotomy, because they're two totally separate concepts. And, we used an example, as I write, about maybe a cancer patient, or right now in the midst of what we're going through economically, there may be people who are displaced or in transition, and their situation may seem to be hopeless, but hope provides the opportunity to be responsible for crafting a better tomorrow. And it's this idea of setting a goal, pursuing that with passion, adjusting when necessary, and then dealing with the obstacles effectively in order to reimagine or re-goal when it's necessary. So even someone who may be facing, let's call it stage 4 cancer, and the end of life may be imminent, the goal may not be survival. The goal now may be finishing well. The goal now may be to focus on developing more intimacy with those around you. The goal may be to leave a legacy. So the goal you can still have hope to see tomorrow immediately be better than today, even if the long-term prospect isn't good, which then gives this whole new meaning, significance to life and to the challenges that we encounter, because all of us have experienced blocked goals. And when we experience a blocked goal, or let's just say a disappointing setback, how do we respond? How resilient are we in that moment? And then that provides, if we understand the dynamics of hope and how we can apply hope, it can change our perspective, and it can make tomorrow, not guaranteed next week, not guaranteed next month, but you and I aren't guaranteed that either.
Right.
How can you just make tomorrow better than today? And that's powerful.
So are you saying, Randy, that there's in this whole message on hope, that there's a stake in the ground that says, my hope is built on this, versus somebody that would say, oh, that Dennis, he's the eternal optimist. He doesn't face reality. He's just always optimistic. He's got hope, but it's like you said, kind of mushy in that. So there is a difference between the two, but I think what I'm hearing is it's something that's, it's not fleeting. It's something it's like I said before, it's like, this is the direction I'm headed, and that's charting my course.
That's right. Because optimism is only half of hope. And we break this down because there are a lot of concepts that have been put out into the market. Grit, you've heard of that. Optimism, emotional intelligence, and they're all very helpful aspects. They're all great psychological factors that will help us deal effectively with the challenges that come into our world, but none of those are as complete as hope. And so hope is not wishful thinking. It's not a Pollyanna attitude, seeing life through rose-colored lenses. Hope is actually functional. And hope consists of 4 things, and that's the work. In other words, what's the goal? Are you setting an inspirational goal? The will, which is the volition. It's the emotional constitution. It's the passion, the energy, the enthusiasm that you bring, which, to your point, that can be fleeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the work, it's the will, it's the way, it's the agility to be able to reimagine and adjust when we face obstacles and have to change course. And the fourth part is the with. It's the people we do it with.
I love it.
Who do we surround ourselves with?
Yeah.
So where optimism um, is your explanatory style of why things have happened, hope is your direction for the future. So it's not just about what you're encountering today, it's painting a preferred picture of tomorrow and truly believing that you're not a victim, but that you can be responsible for creating results tomorrow. But here's the key: creating results tomorrow. And here's the thing: if I can make tomorrow just 1 degree better than today, even if I'm not guaranteed next month, by the time I end in the next month, my life will be 30% better. It's a matter of making incremental progress tomorrow and every day. If you're committed to making incremental progress, I guess a good way to look at it, or maybe a good way to say it, is, hey, I promise you that today I will be better than I was yesterday. But hang on, because I'm only half as good today as I'm going to be tomorrow.
There you go.
And I think that's that responsibility part where we say, okay, there are a lot of factors in my life and world that are beyond my control. But what I can control is how I approach tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key.
Love it. Love it. Our guest today on the Ignite podcast is Dr. Randy Ross. And here at Ignite Speakers, we're thrilled to be able to represent you as one of our speakers. And we would encourage our listeners to the podcast to go to igniteadvisorygroup.com. And there you'll find all kinds of information, not only on Randy, but how to be able to book him as a speaker. And so I encourage you to do that. But Randy, they can go to, you've got a site where they can go and they can get some of your videos and they can learn more about you, and they can begin growing before they bring you in for an event, right?
Absolutely. So they can go to drrandyross.com, which has a lot of explanation of what we do and the messages that we bring, but also YouTube. Just type in Dr. Randy Ross and there's a whole channel there with a bunch of content that you can explore as well, and some videos that will help you work through each of the chapters in the book Relationomics.
Great. So we've been talking about Remarkable. We've been talking about Relationomics. We've been talking about a future book not that far off on
Hope
hope.
Rises.
On hope. And so what message do you feel is needed and most appropriate for you to bring to the market today?
Yeah. Well, I've got to come back to Hope Rises, Dennis, because that's what I'm doing with my time. When my schedule shifted and my calendar was filled with speaking opportunities, and now those are no more because of what we're going through. It's going to be a while till those begin to fall back into place. I'm using the time to write this book. And the reason I chose to write this book, I'd actually started on another book on personal growth and development, and then changed horses as soon as we entered into these challenging times, because I just realized that, we're facing physical challenges with the COVID situation, economic challenges, and the storms are only just beginning to brew. But the biggest storm, I believe, the storm that no one is really effectively talking about, is the storm that's gathering on the horizon, and that's the storm of anxiety, depression, uncertainty about the future. I think there's a whole emotional health tsunami that's about ready to hit us, because people who are being challenged with this transition of life as we know it, we're not sure what the new norm is going to be.
Right.
And so uncertainty creates a lot of fear. And what I wanted to do was put a message out into the marketplace that will help people deal effectively with the challenges today, but also dream new dreams. Here's a great question. Kind of puts things into perspective. anytime you're dealing with challenges or difficulties, or you're facing a period of time like we're all experiencing right now, the question you'd ask is, what does this now make possible?
Hmm.
What does this now make possible? Because I think people are looking at it and they're afraid, they're scared because they're focused on what's now impossible. What can I now not do? How have I been limited? What are the restrictions? How are things going to change? Well, that's natural, but if you stay there, it's really easy to get caught in the muck and the quagmire, make no progress. What does this now make possible? That's the question I asked myself. And one of the things I wanted to do was write another book. Guess what? I've got the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
What does this now make possible? Now it makes possible for our family to have dinner every single night together. Now this makes possible after dinner for our family to play games together. Now this makes possible depth of conversations like we've never had before because we got all this quality time together.
Mm.
My wife and I, Luann, you know her well, we looked at each other when this whole thing started and we said, you know what? This is a time that when the boys grow up, they will tell their kids about what happened. So how do we want them to remember this? Well, what do we want them to tell their kids? Was this a time of strife and conflict and relational, turmoil within our home? Or do we want them to look back on it and go, you know what? It was challenging. We couldn't stand to be cooped up in the house, but it was the best time because of the relational richness that we were able to experience. And that's what I hope, will happen. I'll leave you with this last thought. You may remember back in 2009, there was a commercial that came out by Allstate, and it showed Dennis Haysbert looking out over Los Angeles. Dennis is that big guy with the deep voice. And he made this statement. He said, how will we remember today? Will we remember this as the Great Recession or the recession that made us great?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to look back on this and we're going to have to ask the question, how will we remember these times? Will we remember these times as the great pandemic or the pandemic that made us great?
Love it.
And so hope allows us to have a perspective, changes the way we see things in such a way that we can do what's necessary today in order to allow this to be a period of time that makes us better.
Love it, love it, love it. I was sitting here thinking, and because you mentioned, Luann, an apple does not fall far from the tree. And I wish everybody on this podcast had the opportunity to meet your dad, an incredible man, an incredible leader. And I know he's incredibly proud of you and the work that you're doing. And so thank you for being part of our Ignite podcast. And it's been truly a joy to spend these few minutes together.
Dennis, thank you for the time, for the invitation, but more importantly, thank you for the friendship and the support that you've provided through the years.
Well, thank you.
Really appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you. Same here. And I would encourage again our listeners to go to igniteadvisorygroup.com. There you can learn everything, not only about Randy, but able to book him as a speaker into one of your events because they're going to be gearing back up and we're excited to get out to talk about relationships, but about hope. So thank you much and have a great day to everybody and a great day to you, Randy.